Viewer discretion is strongly advised. The following is for educational and entertainment purposes only. This isn't a scene from a movie. This is real, word for word federal courtroom testimony from the Sean Diddy Combs trial as reported by Inner City Press. No one expected what happened next. The courtroom door opened and Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson stepped inside. Not the electrifying WWE legend, not the billion-dollar box office hero. What walked in was a man haunted, worn down, human. He wasn't there for press. He wasn't there to protect anyone. He was there to tell the truth. And when he took the stand, what came out stunned the entire room. The Rock began speaking, and the words were nothing short of horrifying. He described twisted initiations, strange rituals he claimed were tied to his earliest days in Hollywood. Painful, humiliating, deeply disturbing things. But what shook the courtroom wasn't what he went through. It was who he said was behind it. Sean Diddy Combs. The Rock's voice cracked as he began. He said Diddy wasn't just a name in the industry. He was a gatekeeper, a manipulator. He claimed Diddy orchestrated his early Hollywood connections, that he had a strange, obsessive control over what Dwayne could and couldn't do, and that control came at a price. He said it began with a ritual, one that still haunted him, eating raw monkey brains, being locked in a basement, being forced to prove loyalty and through humiliation. No cameras were allowed in court, but the silence said it all. There had been celebrities before, Monique, Denzel, even Jamie Foxx had taken the stand. But this was different. This wasn't gossip. This wasn't rumor. This was Dwayne Johnson under oath, looking Diddy in the eye and saying, "I was one of them. I played along, and I paid a price no one saw." When he walked into the courtroom, everything changed. Gone was the motivational icon. Gone was the charismatic crowd-hyping superstar. He wasn't wearing a smile. He wasn't flexing. His eyes were heavy. His steps were slow. His face hollow. Even Diddy turned and shifted in his seat. His legal team whispered to each other, visibly tense. Prosecutors didn't react because they knew. They had planned this moment. Dwayne approached the witness stand, but didn't sit. He gripped the railing. He looked at the judge. "May I speak before we begin?" The judge nodded. He turned to the jury, then to Diddy. "I don't want to be here," he said quietly, "but I have to be. I've lived with this for almost 20 years, and the truth is, I'm still scared. But I'm more scared of what happens if I stay silent." And the courtroom went still. He was sworn in. He sat. And then he said it. "You all know me as The Rock, the guy who never breaks, but I'm about to break now." His voice wasn't theatrical. It was dry, raspy, barely hanging on. And what I'm about to say isn't just about Sean Combs. It's about the system that let him do what he did for years. Then came the sentence no one saw coming. I was one of them. I thought playing along meant survival. That's when the room changed. Because what The Rock described next would haunt headlines for weeks to come. And this was only the beginning. It was 2001. I was fresh out of wrestling, stepping into film. The Scorpion King had just hit, and I was hungry, ambitious, but completely naive. Then came Diddy. He didn't show up like a record executive or a mogul. He came in like a mentor, a connector, the man who had keys to every locked door in Hollywood. He said, "Let's talk off the record." I thought it was business. I thought he believed in me. I didn't know what I was walking into. At first, it was all industry nights. Mansions in Miami and Los Angeles. Chill settings, champagne glasses, handshakes with casting directors, producers, studio heads. Everyone said the same thing. If Diddy features with you, you're good. But over time, the vibe shifted. It stopped feeling like networking, and it started to feel like a test. He'd lean in and ask, "You down for greatness? Would you bleed for it?" I laughed it off, but he didn't. His face never moved. Then the favors started. Odd hour invites, late night calls. One time he told me to show up at a house in Bel Air at exactly 2:13 a.m. Said that's when real decisions get made. So I went. Nobody was there, not for an hour. Then came a group, men in black suits, silent. Not a word, not even eye contact. It felt like a cult waiting for its leader. And when Diddy walked in, everything stopped. He dimmed the lights. Then audio started playing through hidden speakers. His own voice, looping over and over. "Are you worthy? Are you ready? Would you eat what I feed you?" I told myself it was performance art, just Diddy being eccentric. But inside, my gut was screaming. Something was off. Then came the first real test. He asked me to meet him alone. Undisclosed location, outside LA. I wanted to say no, but my publicist said, this could be the meeting that changes your life. Turns out he was right. It changed everything, just not the way I thought. The moment I said the words monkey brains, you could feel the whole courtroom stop breathing. I had never said it aloud, not to my wife, not to my closest friends, not even my therapist. I was blindfolded in the car. I asked the driver where we were going. He turned up the music. When we arrived, I was escorted inside by two men and to a house lit only by red floor lanterns, walls covered in black cloth, no windows, no clocks, just one low table and 5 men in suits, seated in silence. At the head of it all was Diddy. He was laughing, calm, holding a crystal goblet filled with something that looked like oil. Then came the tray. No words, no ceremony, just a steel plate placed right in front of me. They uncovered it, still steaming. Pieces of raw monkey brain, no seasoning, just tissue, wet, trembling. I looked down, and Diddy said, "Everyone who's made it ate. Everyone who didn't vanished." Then he told the others, let him feel the pressure. I tried to leave. Door was locked. I asked if it was a joke, a prank, a ritual. I even tried laughing. No one laughed with me. Then Diddy leaned in, put a spoon in my hand, whispered, "Hollywood's not about talent, it's about obedience." I wanted to throw up, but I was frozen. My hands shook as I lifted the spoon. I don't remember the taste, just the sound of chewing, the room laughing, and then silence. He sat at that table for what felt like a lifetime. 30 minutes of silence, broken only by the sound of cutlery and the quiet hum of breathless observation. They didn't rush him. They watched, judging, measuring. When it was done, Diddy stood up slowly and clapped once. "Welcome to level 2, he said with a smirk. Dwayne looked toward the jury, or more in this case, the faces staring back at him in disbelief. "I didn't leave that room the same man who walked in," he said. "Not because of what I ate, but because of what I agreed to give up just to be accepted." The courtroom was frozen. This wasn't just a recounting of trauma. It was a raw confession about the price of silence in the entertainment world, and how deeply it can cost a person their sense of self. As his voice steadied, Dwayne began describing what came next. It wasn't congratulations or applause. It was surveillance, testing. He was being reprogrammed, not in chains, but in expectation. "They started treating me differently," he said, "like I was one of them now, but not in a way that felt earned, in a way that felt owned." What he thought would be a business retreat turned into something else entirely. He arrived at a desert compound. No agents, no producers, just dimly lit hallways and a scattering of familiar faces that all wore the same haunted expression. They were told to surrender their phones. Music pulsed from behind the walls, not melodies, just noise. Hours passed with no clear schedule. Meals came randomly. Instructions were given in mantras. Success requires surrender. Speak only when chosen. Obedience is power. "I thought it was some weird theater exercise," Dwayne admitted, "but it wasn't about performance, it was about control." He remembered seeing the same look in the eyes of other guests, people he admired, people who, like him, had once believed success was about talent, not obedience. "You'd see each other in the hallway," he said, "and give that look, like hostages who'd learned not to speak out loud." The court was silent. The story didn't sound like Hollywood anymore. It sounded like something far darker, cloaked in glitz, but built on fear. And this, as Dwayne hinted, was only the beginning. Dwayne Johnson shared that after a certain experience, everything changed. He began losing sleep, growing paranoid, questioning his identity. It stopped being just about acting. It felt like he was being shaped into a product molded by unseen forces. No chains were needed, just silence, confusion, and control. He spoke of what he called the machine behind the curtain. After going through what he described as obedience trials, a flood of opportunities appeared, but they came with conditions. "I started getting roles I was never even up for. People said, 'Diddy vouched for you.' I didn't ask why. I was just grateful," he recalled. In a meeting with a major studio executive, his talent wasn't discussed. Instead, they said, "We hear you're someone who plays the game." That was what mattered. When he questioned contract terms, he was warned that pushing back could make his opportunities vanish. These weren't offers, he realized. They were assignments. He described Diddy as a figure with influence far beyond music. Someone with stakes, relationships, and debts owed. The message was clear. If he wanted you blacklisted, it happened. Dwayne remembered declining an after-hours gathering. A week later, his agent told him a studio had pulled him from a major project. No explanation. That's when he realized silence wasn't just expected, it was required. Even those around him, his managers, his lawyers, avoided saying certain names unless it was in praise. He began to feel like a puppet, controlled not just by studios, but by a web of hidden alliances sustained by fear and favors. You learn quickly that the real power in Hollywood doesn't operate in the open, he said. It's all whispers, debts, and unspoken rules. Then came the moment that changed everything. He recalled attending a private event at a luxury estate in the Hollywood Hills. It was pitched as a private screening and networking night, but once he arrived, he knew something was off. Security guarded every door, phones were confiscated, guests were handed masks. Not for theatrics, but for anonymity. It didn't feel like a party, he said. It felt like an initiation. Not mine, someone else's. He walked the perimeter of the estate, uneasy. What he saw disturbed him. People I admired, actors, musicians, directors, weren't celebrating. They looked lost, like they were trying to prove or hide something. In a hallway, he found a young, well-known actor crying, drink in hand, trembling. When Dwayne asked if he was okay, the actor whispered, "They told me this is what it takes." That was the night Dwayne left early. That was the night, he said, the glamour cracked, and the machinery beneath was exposed. He went home and couldn't sleep, not just because of what he saw, but because he finally understood why he'd been protected. I wasn't invited because they liked me. I was invited because I was useful, because I had proven I could stay quiet. Choking up, he continued. Seeing that young man reminded me who I used to be. Before the fear, before the shame. He looked at the judge. That night, I made a decision. If anyone ever asked what I saw, I wouldn't lie. And now, on the witness stand, he kept that promise. The courtroom was still. Dwayne looked straight ahead. People ask why we stay silent, why actors, musicians, athletes don't speak when things aren't right. I'll tell you why. Because it's terrifying. For much of his early career, he said, he believed survival meant smiling, performing, and never questioning those in control. You're taught not to ruffle feathers, not to say names. You think, if I speak, I lose everything I built. His silence wasn't from guilt, but fear of being blacklisted, labeled difficult, unreliable. Sometimes it wasn't threats, just watching others disappear, watching the phone stop ringing, watching contracts vanish. He mentioned other actors who faded from view after stepping away from the inner circle. They weren't unstable, they were tired. Tired of pretending, tired of being owned. Keeping secrets, he said, took a personal toll, anxiety, isolation, mistrust. You feel like you're part of something you never agreed to, but leaving means burning bridges that no one will help you rebuild. He paused, his voice cracked. And worst of all, you start to wonder, were you complicit just for surviving? Dwayne nodded toward Cassie Ventura's legal team. Seeing her speak up changed everything. It reminded me, silence protects the wrong people. Then he sat taller, not as The Rock, but as a man who had been reshaped by his experiences. There's this myth that once you've made it, you're untouchable, but the truth is, the higher you go, the harder it is to speak. He had built a brand around strength and resilience, but behind closed doors, he often felt powerless. I stayed silent because the cost of speaking felt too high, but over time, that silence stopped feeling like protection and started to feel like betrayal. He remembered a young fan once telling him, "You're the guy who never quits." That sentence haunted him, because in some ways, he had. Quit on his younger self, on his values, on those still trapped in systems they never chose. "I'm not testifying to cancel anyone," he said, wiping a tear. "I'm here because I've been silent long enough, and I don't want anyone who looks up to me to think silence is strength. This wasn't about revenge," he said. It was about accountability. Then he turned to face Sean Diddy Combs. "I want to say this to you man to man," he began, calm, controlled. "You made me believe I had to sacrifice myself to succeed, that I had to surrender my integrity just to be allowed in the room, and I believed it. But that wasn't power, that was fear, dressed up as influence." He spoke for the others too, the ones who never got the chance to speak, the ones still trapped in silence. "You don't get to define my legacy, not anymore." As he stepped down from the witness stand, his final words echoed through the courtroom. "It ends here, with the truth." He didn't leave as a victim or a headline, but as someone who had reclaimed his story, and everyone watching knew something in Hollywood had just shifted. Just before exiting, Dwayne paused, not to address the press or Diddy, but the entire room. "I want to leave one last thing on record," he said. "This story, my story, isn't just about me. It's about the people who never got to sit in this chair, the ones who didn't survive, the ones still stuck behind the curtain, afraid no one will believe them." And then he looked out across the courtroom, not just at the jury, not just at the judge, but at the culture that allowed silence to thrive. For decades, Hollywood has been built on a lie, the myth that abuse is the price of success. But that myth is breaking now. Not with rage, not with revenge, but with truth. He took a breath. "I stayed quiet because I was afraid of losing everything. But the truth is, I never had anything if I didn't have myself." A quiet murmur of support rippled through the gallery. No one interrupted. Dwayne nodded once more. To anyone watching, still wondering if it's safe to speak up, let this be your sign. The silence is over. We're not afraid anymore. And then he walked out. No entourage, no PR spin, just a man who had finally spoken, and a system that, for the first time in a long time, didn't know how to silence him.